Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
Tom, thanks so much for joining this afternoon.
Great to be with you, Steve, as always.
So a lot I want to cover with you, Tom. I want to start with, what do you think about Art Laffer? Art Laffer says cutting tax rates is good for the economy. What say you?
Yeah, I think he's definitely ahead of CBO, that's for sure. So CBO consistently always overestimates the revenue losses from tax cuts. That's a tradition at CBO, essentially. Right. And I don't think it's any different in the current negotiations that's taking place, essentially, that they can't recognize enough that the tax base increases when you cut tax rates, essentially. Tax revenue is the product of tax rates times the tax base. And whenever you basically lower, not whenever, but many times when you lower tax rates, the tax base increases more, and therefore you get higher revenue. This occurred, for example, in 2017 when when people were yelling that this is going to be a huge issue with the corporate tax cuts. It stimulated overall revenue collection, not necessarily on corporate taxes, but in the rest of the economy, the revenues rose essentially. So I don't see why it's so. I don't see. I think it's a government disease to basically want to have revenue. That's why they're kind of clinging on to it like this, like they are at CBO.
Yeah, I agree totally. You and I both, you much more than than myself, but we're in the Oval Office a lot with Donald Trump in his first term. You were one of his chief economists, and I would visit him once every 6 weeks or so there in the Oval Office. And so you got to see as much as anyone Donald Trump's economic thinking on the job, Tom, in his first term. Tell me if you don't mind. Tell me what you think about Trump's basic understanding of economics. He's more of a businessman than an economist, but he seems to just get it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, exactly. I was actually very, very positively impressed because obviously before you come in, you get the press version of Trump, which is completely false. Right. But it was actually amazing because many times when we argued, or debated in the Oval, he was way ahead of many advisors. Essentially, you give him a point, and he would run with that point very, very quickly, understand it much quicker than the rest of the room, and then have comments back on it. So that was very refreshing. I think. I mean, he was compared to other presidents, he's probably one of the most economically astute presidents we've had in many, many decades. Certainly, Biden was not very good on understanding economics.
Well, the funny thing is,
even guys like Reagan, they haven't been in the private sector, and this guy's been there and been dealing with it on a daily basis. So I think that's partly where it's coming from.
I've always said that, that having a businessman in the White House makes a lot more sense if you want a good economy than having a politician in the White House. And I agree with you. I mean, I felt like Trump, he's not an economist, obviously. He's not a, PhD economist like you are, but he has, I call it common sense economics. He has common sense, and that puts him ahead of a lot of the other politicians. But it seemed like most of the time, I mean, sometimes I disagree with his policy decisions, but most of the time I really felt that his decisions on what to do on the economy just made sense.
And I also think economists many times have preconceived views on things, and his instincts are extremely good. He has very good instincts on what's good economic policy or not. And sometimes if you're trained in economics, you come in with a sort of a bias towards a particular topic from your training without seeing other angles of it. I would say tariffs are one of those where, for example, with China, right? So any economist would say tariffs are bad. We learned that in grad school, blah, 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 etc. But China is a completely different issue because they're an adversary and they're basically using tariffs to discipline people. That's not how we've been taught in economics to think about tariffs as a negotiation tool, essentially. So it's a different perspective that he brings in many times from a business perspective, which is useful, which I think some economist friends of mine are just not getting. And then they kind of get it maybe half a year, 2 years later. Even Larry and I, kind of have
Larry Kudlow. You're talking about Larry Kudlow.
And then we came along a little bit afterwards,
Yeah. So that is a very good point. One of my heroes, and probably yours too, was Milton Friedman. And, Milton Friedman was what I'd call a unilateral free trader. He always said, we should be for free trade no matter what other countries are doing. But I wonder what he would think about Trump's idea of like, hey, we can force these other countries to lower their tariffs, and we may even have freer trade as a result of that kind of negotiation. But I've only got about 5 minutes left with you. I'm talking to Tom Philipson, who was a chief economist for Donald Trump in his first term. I wanted to, one of the issues that I disagree with Donald Trump on is this idea of the price controls on drugs. And I'm worried about this, Tom, because I think we need to always be at the forefront of drug R&D and innovation. We want to see as quickly as possible cures for cancer and heart disease and MS and all these other terrible things. So Trump says, look, the system is unfair to Americans. And to some extent, he is right. It's not fair that we pay more for the drugs that we develop in the United States than other countries. But I'm not sure drug price controls are the right thing to do. But I'd love, you're an expert on this. What's the right solution here?
So good, so good, so good.
Get ready, because Clear the Rack is on at your Nordstrom Rack store. Now through Monday, find incredible deals on Wear Now styles. On sale for even less at Nordstrom Rack. Take an extra 25% off red tag clearance throughout the store from brands like Free People, Steve Madden, Vince, and more. All sales final. The best stuff goes fast. So shop this sale at Nordstrom Rack today. Please see NordstromRack.com or ask a store associate for details.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Yeah, so as a background, it turns out that prescription drugs, this sounds weird when you say it, but they're actually not more expensive in the U.S. And the reason is because prescription drugs are 91% generics, and we have the lowest prices of generics anywhere. So for 91% of prescriptions, U.S. citizen gets lower prices relative to other countries. Obviously, we have higher brand prices, but if you incorporate that and the fact that other countries don't use generics as much and they're also using more expensive generics,
most of the drugs are generics, right?
Yeah, exactly. 91% of prescriptions are generics. So basically, 90% of the time you're getting a cheaper price in the U.S. compared to other countries. So that's a backdrop why price controls in the U.S. are a little bit misleading, I think. And I think he's kind of in between here because he realizes there's a free riding problem. U.S. provides roughly 70% of earnings for biomedical innovation in the world, even though we're 24% of global GDP or something.
Right.
So we are overrepresented, because we have free market pricing, not in Medicare and Medicaid, but outside in the commercial markets, in labor markets, we have free market pricing that supports innovation anywhere in the world. Essentially, they innovate. Novo Nordisk has the big Ozempic obesity drug. They're not innovating for Danes in Denmark. They're a Danish company. They're innovating for the U.S. market. So the whole global innovation machinery is set up, or essentially works just because U.S. pays the lion's shares of the returns to that innovation. So then the price controls that both the Democrats with the Inflation Reduction Act and now the what's called most favored nation pricing, meaning U.S. should not pay more than other countries, I think it's going to backfire because that's going to increase free riding in my opinion.
Well, how so?
As opposed to because once a company, let's say a given company has U.S., they're never going to sacrifice their U.S. market and have, foreign prices come down, or U.S. prices, come down to foreign prices. Suppose they charge 100 in the U.S. and 50 in Canada. Canada is like 5% of the U.S. sales or something in drugs.
Right.
They're never going to go down to 50 in Canada to satisfy, not selling more expensive in the U.S.
So what are they going to do?
They're going to try to force Canada to come up to the U.S. price. Canada will not come up to the 100, essentially. And then the company is going to find it in their interest to leave the country to not have to deal with satisfying the Canadian price in the U.S. Once they leave the country, Canada has an open ticket to basically compulsory license the drug. You're not selling in our country. You refuse to sell in our country. That just means there's a smaller global market for these companies, and they're going to have more free riding as opposed to less free riding because they're never going to go out and the key is they're never going to sacrifice their lucrative U.S. market by pricing down to less lucrative markets. Yeah. So they're going to try to force those other countries up, and they're going to refuse, and then they have a blank ticket to do whatever they want.
So we've only got a minute left, Tom, but I wanted to ask you this. So just let's come to the conclusion of this because this is a great analysis you're providing. So it sounds to me like this has to be part of these trade negotiations with these countries, that you're not going to rip off our drugs.
And we should have. I have argued, and I have a piece coming out in National Review this week that basically says we should have the same NATO-type agreement on a percent of GDP that gets spent on brand name drugs in a country if they want to get access to U.S. drugs. Or we can have whatever sticks we want in that trade agreement. It could be tariffs or whatever, but it should be a stick that gets kicked in if they don't spend, a certain percent of their GDP on innovation or brand name innovation and basically try to free ride. It's in their interest to free ride because they're so small that they don't suffer in innovation when they have price control. So, Sweden, even if we didn't have Sweden at all, nothing would happen to innovation. So if they have price controls, they see the same flow of drugs. So it's in their interest to free ride. That's why they're doing it. But we should have trade agreements that there's some penalty for that free riding if they're not living up to a certain percent of GDP spent on brand name drugs.
I like that solution a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. I hope that's where we end up because, look, we are the leader in innovation in drugs, and all these incredible life-saving drugs have almost all of them come from the United States. We want to remain number one on that, but the other countries have to pay their fair share. That's Tom Philipson. Tom, thanks for joining.